Tell
Yeah.
me about the machinist qualification, please.
Yeah, no worries. So first of all, to sort of kick us off, the machining technician qualification is new, or fairly new. It's replaced the old engineering technician machinist pathway. So we've not had any apprentice go through that endpoint assessment yet. We've got a few that are close to it, but nobody's gone through that process. So the information that we've got on there is based on the endpoint assessment plan, not based on sort of feedback from the EPA. The original endpoint assessment for the Eng Tech was wholly online or remote. There was no observation, there was no sort of apprentice being watched by an assessor. And that's what's changed in the new one. So, with the new machining technician, we've got a practical demonstration or an observation, and that's going to have questioning throughout that. There's going to be an interview which will answer some of those knowledge-based questions and we'll delve into a bit more of the skill. So for that one, the apprentice will produce a portfolio of evidence and then they will be interviewed on that portfolio of evidence. And then the third assessment method is an assessment of knowledge through a multiple choice test. So the multiple choice test will be in a controlled environment. That'll be done at BCOT. That's likely to be the first thing the apprentice does when they go through Gateway. And then it will be the practical demonstration or the observation and the interview. The whole assessment process is pass, merit, or distinction. So for the knowledge test, we've got a pass or a distinction, weirdly, based on what their grades are. For the interview, it is a pass or a distinction. And for the practical demonstration, it's a pass or fail, competent or not competent. Overall, they get scored, and then at the end, all of those scores get added up, and that determines whether they get pass, a merit, or a distinction. So, right, if we go through the portfolio side first, I suppose,
Yeah.
or the technical interview side. So there needs to be, which is different to normal. So normally, or on the old engineering technician, there had to be three reports that they would produce, that the apprentice would produce. We would put them forward, and then there'd be an interview on three reports. Now they can use three separate job packs, but there needs to be at least eight pieces of evidence. So those pieces of evidence need to be evidencing that the apprentice has got certain skills in understanding what the drawings are, understanding different machining techniques, understanding whether they're blocking up and using work holding devices for CNC tasks, or whether they're, manually machining using a manual machine. So this is the same endpoint assessment depending on whether they're a CNC turner, CNC miller, or a sort of or grinder, or if they're using manual machines. So they have to adapt that observation and adapt that interview depending on what the apprentice is doing. So that's where it's a little bit different. So they're not going to use the portfolio exactly to ask their questions. What they're going to do is use that portfolio of evidence to understand what the apprentice's day-to-day activities look like or can be. So they'll have an understanding as to are they a miller, are they a turner, are they a grinder, so on and so forth. And then they'll be able to say, okay, well, these are the kinds of things that I need to ask because that's what a miller should know. There will be questions on tolerancing. There will be questions on surface finishing. There will be questions on how they're producing certain forms or certain profiles, that kind of thing. There will be questions about why we use different cutting tools, why we use different tips, coolant versus non-coolant, those kinds of things. But there'll be very general machining questions geared around what that apprentice does. And that's what's come from the endpoint assessment plan. Over the next sort of few months, when we've had a few start going through, we'll have a better understanding of, where they like to focus their questions.
Yeah. With the submitted evidence,
Yep.
are we still considering there'll be write-ups being put in, or are we thinking of routing cards, engineering drawings, first off inspection, documentation? Would that on its own quantify or satisfy, or are we still looking for a written account on how the job
Yeah.
was undertaken?
So that's a good point. So for this assessment process, we are looking at policies, procedures, route cards, drawings, witness statements, photographs, videos, video clips, those kinds of things. They don't like reflective accounts. They don't want to see on this day I did this and this is what I learned from it. They don't like to see any type of self-assessment. They don't like to see those reflective accounts. Um, if we're going to be using employer feedback like witness testimony, that kind of thing, then it needs to be fact-based. This is what the tolerances were. This is the drawing that I gave them, and this is what they produced. It shouldn't have any opinions in it. I think they did a really good job. If that comes in there, we can't use it as evidence. So it's got to be very, very factual um, in its evidence. Um, it can, and well, every portfolio should contain a statement at the end from the employer confirming that this is a job that was done by the apprentice. This is the time that was allowed. The apprentice made that time, did it within the time, made X amount of them, so on and so forth. There were, you know, this is the error rate or whatever it might be. So there's got to be that sort of fact statement at the end as well to prove that the apprentice did it.
Yeah. So technically, could it be one job that they are putting forward that they've done if they have approximately 8 pieces of information that go with that job?
I mean, in short, yes, it could, as long as it covers enough profiles, it covers enough evidence. So it's got to be a rounded view of what that apprentice does day to day. So if it's a very big job that with lots of different operations involved, then yeah, it can definitely be used. If it's sort of something they make 1,000 off or 10,000 off, then probably not one
No.
job. We might be looking at three, four, five different jobs.
Yeah. Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
no worries. So that's how that interview goes. That's what we're looking for. So no reflective accounts at all. A nice rounded bit of evidence on what they do day to day, week to week, showing the assessor this is what I do. And this is what I've been doing for the last 3 years, 3.5 years. And then they can have that informed discussion on that. The next one is a practical demonstration. So that's where it's a little bit different again from any other practical demonstration or observation that we've done as an endpoint. So there is a planning meeting where the IEPA or the endpoint assessor will meet the apprentice and the employer. So we would expect yourself as the assessor or somebody from BCOT to also be on that call or at that meeting. Because we haven't had any go through yet, it's undetermined whether that will be online or face to face. My personal view is they would probably like it face to face so they get a feel for the company and they know what
Yeah.
they're doing and they can see the machines. Um, but what they want to do is make the assessment based on what the company do. So it's a holistic assessment method. They don't have some bog standard drawings off the shelf and then say, right, you're going to make that. They would design the observation based around what that apprentice does within the company. So that's going to be something that incorporates whether it's grinding, milling, CNC, manual, whatever it might be. Um, they are going to speak to the apprentice, speak to the employer, devise that assessment, come up with some ideas, and then 2 weeks notice. They need 2 weeks notice before the assessment to devise what questions they're going to be asking at that assessment, that kind of thing. And then it's undetermined when, but it says before the assessment, they will then provide a drawing or provide the job spec for what they expect the apprentice to do. So frustratingly for me, it doesn't say a day before or a week before, it says before. So that doesn't help much. What we do know though is that practical demonstration must take 4.5 hours or more. So it's not going to be a small job. It's not going to be one operation. It's not going to be a single sort of operation. It's going to be something with many different profiles or many forms or many operations, depending on whether they're CNC or manual. Um, but it has to take at least 4.5 hours. They have a bit of a split in there, like 10% up or down. So that's why that meeting beforehand, that planning meeting, is really, really crucial, so that they have an understanding from the employer as to what they actually do and what kind of jobs happen there. And they can say, okay, well that seems like it's about 4.5 hours. They can have that discussion with the apprentice and with the employer beforehand then. What they need to see for that observation, they've got to see that the apprentice is preparing the work area, that they're following health and safety controls, that they're potentially proving out a program before they start it, maybe. They need to be selecting the appropriate tools, the appropriate work holding devices, the drawings, the risk assessments, whatever else it might be, anything they need, the route cards for that job. They need to see that they are going to set up whichever type of machine it is that they're using, whether that's conventional or CNC, whether it's grinding, milling, turning, whatever it might be. If it's a CNC machine, if they're a CNC programmer, sorry, CNC machinist, they will need to see loading, proving, or validating or changing of a program, depending on what they're doing. But they have to be loading and proving a program at the very least, to show that they have that knowledge, that they're not just plugging in a USB and then, you know, tightening a bit of metal down and push and go. So they need to understand what's happening as well. So the kinds of things that they would like to see. So if they're conventional, or well, if they're turners, so conventional or CNC turners, they're going to want to see things like screw cutting, internal or external threads. They're going to look at bored holes, tapered diameters, different profile forms, eccentric features, grooves, undercuts, that kind of stuff. So it's not just going to be basic forms. They want to see that they're doing stuff, if you like. When it comes to milling, it'll be things like pockets, it'll be curved profiles, circular profiles, it'll be holes, it'll be PCD or linear holes, it'll be things like milling or tapping within, um, thread tapping, that kind of stuff. It'll be keyways, T slots. Those are the kinds of things that they want to see. Um, and then if they're grinding, then it's not just going to be surface grinding that they want to see. They need to see, internal profiles, external profiles, steps, flat faces, step faces, angled faces, profile faces, those kinds of things. They want to see that there's thought and a process, not just I've got lots of pins that I need to lap down or grind down to a size. Um, they're obviously going to be working to a very tight tolerance. The tolerances within the endpoint assessment plan um, state that it's going to be dependent on what they're doing, but reamed and bored holes will be H8, for instance. Screw threads will be down to a British standard medium fit. Geometric tolerances are going to be based on what the company normally do, but it's not going to be, zero point 0.5 of a mil. We're looking at tight tolerances. If we're grinding, for instance, we're looking at sort of 5 microns, that kind of stuff. So that's what they want to see. Over and above everything else, they want to see safe use. They want to see that they're doing lots of different things, that they're machining lots of different profiles. They're planning the job, and then they're tidying up and they're restoring that work area back to normal. So if it's a root card, are they signing it off, sending it off to the next person? Is it going into quality control? Are they doing their own inspection? That kind of stuff. And that's what they want to be looking at. Um, the questions are supposed to be asked after the practical, but again, like I say, this hasn't happened yet, so they might be asked throughout, depending on if it works. But the endpoint assessment plan states that the questions will be asked after the practical at 4.5 hours, and then they dictate half an hour for questions. And that should then cover that whole assessment. They should be asking at least 5 questions for that practical observations.
Thank you very much.
Is that all right?
That's brilliant.
Good.
That was great to stop that. That's yeah, that is